Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 121. This week we're going to be exploring AquaSec Teams Harbor, and so I'm super excited about that. But first, let me say it's great to be back and sharing knowledge and exploring things together again. These last few weeks have been a difficult time for the U.S., but they serve to highlight an even more difficult time that many have experienced here in the U.S. and around the world. These last few weeks, we've seen some change and solidarity that addresses some of those concerns, but this is the work of generations, and we collectively have a lot to do to address it completely. In the meantime, remember that you can affect change by listening and supporting everyone around you. This month, we have a bunch of celebrations. Here in the Bay and actually all around the world, we're celebrating, or in the U.S., we're celebrating Juneteenth, which is a celebration of the ending of slavery here in the U.S. And even this highlights the problem that have been a focus of a lot of the protests lately. The Emancipation Proclamation was set forth on January 1st, 1863, and we commemorate June 19th, 1865, as the date that the action associated with those words finally took hold all across the U.S., 2.5 years later, after that proclamation was made. This month is also Pride Month, a time when we celebrate and welcome lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning people everywhere. We saw historic legislation passed by the Supreme Court ruling that it's unlawful to fire someone for being gay or transgender. This happened in 2020. This only just happened in 2020. The federal ban on sex discrimination in the workplace covers sexual orientation and gender identity-based discrimination, and that's amazing. The U.S. is entirely too slow to change, and the protests are another important step in driving change against systemic racism and inequality. This community is amazing in its diversity and its inclusion, and some of the most amazing people I've ever worked with or known are in important and critical roles in our community. And our explicit community values ensure that we're keeping projects inclusive and positive places to participate and work. But it's up to us to keep our commons healthy. It's super important stuff. Lastly, I'll say that I'm super proud of our community and organizations like the CNCF for addressing this in an open and public way. Black lives matter. Love is love, and we are all of us in this together. So all of that said, what can we do? We can take some time to listen and read and understand our history, to listen and read and understand what people are going through, to empathize with those around us. We can take some time to stand with those that are calling for change. So thank you for listening to that. That was a statement I'd prepared for the beginning of this session because it is incredibly important to me, and I hope that it resonates with all of you. So, all right, let's get back into this. So again, this episode is going to be Starboard. So we're going to be talking about what's happening with Starboard and the community and all kinds of other wonderful stuff, just like usual. So let's get into it. There is a new release, a new patch release for Kubernetes out. We have Kubernetes v1 16.11, 117.7, 118.4 coming up. We have some changes in the way that containers work. So if you're actually using containers from kh.gcr.io, and you might be, it's moving. It's about 2 weeks till this happens. If you're interested in digging into it, you can jump into the thread and understand like why it's moving, what's happening to it, and how it works. So good stuff there. Let's say actually to hello to everybody who's out there. I just realized I'm like totally knocking my own hustle here. Let's see how everybody's doing. Who do we have saying hello? We got Fully Geared Bear saying hey. We got Lemati signing in. Good to see you, Lemati. Thank you very much for the idea. We have Jeremy Pruitt saying hello. Mr. Steve Wade, he's actually already played with this tool. I'm actually just playing with it for the first time in this episode, so I'm excited to play with it. Mr. Rory McCune saying good evening. And Liam, hello from the UK. And Liz is checking in. Liz is actually a part of the AquaSec team and a friend, and so I'm looking forward to them helping us answer questions and that sort of thing as we dig in here. So Yvonne saying hello, and Paul checking in. David Michael saying hello to Liz and to us. Sevi, hello. Hey Duffie, everyone, glad to see you're back. I'm super glad to be back. It's awesome to be back. Everybody's saying hello from, some folks saying hello from Hungary, Balaz, and Martine saying hello from the Netherlands, Arnold Frank from Germany, Waleed saying thank you, and thank you everybody. I really appreciate the positive feedback on that. Matthias saying hello from the Netherlands, and Marcos saying it's a Jed from Colorado. Oh, nice. Good to see you, Jed. And Satish saying hello, and Hamid saying from Ireland. Haim saying from Israel, and Pratik from India. Again, just a worldwide group, you know. And we got Brian checking in. How you doing, Brian? We got Ian from the UK, and we got Joy saying, "How are you?" I'm good. I'm excited, and I'm here to celebrate everything with y'all. So Phil saying hello from New York. So let's dig into it a bit more in the content here. So, and my screens are now like in front of me and below me. So like before, you do usually see me going off to the side like that when I'm checking out the chat. This time you're going to see me looking down. That's what that's all about. So moving on here, we got patch updates, SIG updates. We got a bunch of notes from the Kubernetes community meetings. Let's check these out real quick. These look interesting. We got some updates from the PSC, from SIG apps, and from SIG release. SIG release talking about basically what they've been working on in October of 2019 and for upcoming changes. Consider leadership refreshes across the teams and the co-chairs. That's pretty awesome. We got 119 in schedule. 120 is scheduled for 2021. 119 and newer will have 1 year of patch release of support, which is a difference. That'll be interesting. So supporting a particular release for a year rather than deprecating on like the number of supported versions. Things we need from you, discussion on the related pieces. We got some KEPs. Good stuff from the release folks. We got Caleb Miles, Stephen Augustus, and Tim Pepper as chairs. Technical leads, as of later today, these folks have actually just been indoctrinated as the technical leads, which is super exciting. So we've got Jorge and Sasha signing in as technical leads for release. That's tremendous. Some updates from SIG apps. PVC resizing. SIG apps, if you don't know about it, it's actually responsible for a bunch of really interesting stuff. It's not like one particular area. It's kind of like pretty wide-ranging focus for SIG apps. Lots of stuff going on there. Because if you think about it, like Kubernetes is a container platform because we're deploying applications on top of it. So you can imagine how much important stuff is happening. So sidecar KEP is getting called out here. This is one that I think is super important. No viable path forward for Istio Linkerd projects to manage proxy sidecar lifecycle. We need to work with Signo. We need to work with Signo to advise. So this calls out the need for a lifecycle object for sidecars. I think we talked about this a little bit in a previous episode. The chairs are Janet Kuo, Kenneth Owens, Matt Farina, and Adnan Abdul Hussein. All kinds of awesome people working on SIG apps. The Product Security Committee, Tim checking in. Got the core team and some associates. And we have some changes. So Jordan's stepping down. He's been such a critical part of that for so long that it's kind of the end of an era there, to be honest. It'll be really exciting to see what happens. What do? We handle product security stuff. So this is actually, we're going to talk a little bit about this here in just a minute. So bug bounty status, there's been a big drop in bug bounties. What we're working on publicly, get involved. And if you want to check these things out, definitely check them out. There's some good stuff in here. There's also some stuff, an update from SIG Arc. And so obviously the community meeting that happens is awesome if you want to like dig into like what's actually happening monthly in the community meeting. If you want to just get a good update from the different groups that make up our community, that's a great place to jump in there. I just realized I misspelled Kubernetes community values. And I referred to this in the opening statement, right, when we were talking about the community values. And this is what I'm referring to, right? The community values that we represent as a community are documented here. And I think it's really well put, you know? So definitely check that out. The CubeCon North America deadline has been extended. It's been extended to June 28th. So if you do want to actually submit a talk for Boston this year, It's been extended to June 28th. Make sure you get those talks in if you're interested in being in presenting at that. And this is actually going to be co-chaired by Constance and by Stephen. So I'm super excited to see what they can put on together in Boston, and whether that'll be in person or virtual. I don't really know yet, but it'll be exciting to see it happen one way or the other. In the cloud native ecosystem, we got a great write-up on a recent CVE. This is actually what I was referring to on the SIG and the Product Security Committee update. I thought this was a really good read, so let's read through this real quick. Always include the SIG update slides at TGIK so you can follow along. All right. So when it's not only about a Kubernetes CVE. So this was actually, they actually done a TLDR at the bottom, which I think is probably a good place for us to jump in here. Okay. So these two folks were eating pizzas and drinking beers, and they found an in-core Kubernetes vulnerability inside Kubernetes, and it was not a part of the original plan for their winter evening. They conducted additional analysis inside some cloud provider companies that enabled them to increase the impact of the vulnerability and get additional crazy bounties. So you'll find many of the technical details throughout this article, and they would love to hear from you. And they learned that managing and reporting part is the more time consuming than we expected. And I think that this is definitely true of many of the bug bounty systems. And actually, it's generally true when it comes to reporting things like a CVE within different companies, because you got to be really careful about how you go about that, and you have to make sure that you're not like just dropping those things in public, like right out in the open. You need to like go through the proper channels, contact the Kubernetes Product Security Committee, get a CVE assigned, and then handle the embargo until that becomes a public thing. Give the product a chance to actually address it before the vulnerability is exposed. That's what that's all about. So if you're interested in understanding some of the thought process and some of a way to explore how that was done, this article I think is incredible for that. Like they really get into the context. They describe like what they did, how they found it, what they did to further escalate with what they were able to identify. And it was I think it was a super interesting CVE. So definitely check that one out. We have Kubernetes Goat, which is a project by Madhua, I think. But this is actually kind of an interesting one, and I know that Rory and a few other folks have played, Brad and folks like that have been played with this idea before, including Ian. This idea is that like you want to be able to bring up a Kubernetes cluster that may already that may be in a vulnerable state, so that you can explore some of the previous CVEs that were identified in previous versions of Kubernetes, right? So you can understand, so you can pull them apart and like explore them and see how they work and and understand how those were explored, so that you could then take that learning and apply it to other things. So in this Kubernetes Goat scenario thing, they've got different scenarios that do exactly that, right? Using Helm 2 to own a cluster, right? Attacking a private registry, Docker CIS benchmark analysis. There's a bunch of different stuff in here that I think does a really great job of exploring the different vulnerabilities that have been found within Kubernetes. So if security or attacking Kubernetes and those sorts of things are interesting to you, that's a great place to jump in. Argo CD 116 was released, and this is actually one of the premier GetOps models out there. So if you're interested in GetOps or you want to explore it, we should do another episode on GetOps. I think that'd be really good. Yeah, I hear that, Liz. I still have to submit. I haven't even submitted anything for that one yet. And I think I might just take this year off and not submit and just go visit instead. Sometimes it's good to make sure there's room for others to get out there too. Starboard announcement. This happened during our break. We were in the period of time when we weren't doing TGIK, and so I just called this out as a great lead-in to the episode. So this is written by Liz, who's here with us today, talking about basically what they're building here. And I like that Starboard represents a combination of a variety of different tools, right? It's a solution that allows for the integration with multiple tools to produce an output that is useful to folks that are worried about the security of their cluster. And the other piece that really called out to me was that they use an Octant plugin for handling this stuff, right? So the Starboard project like integrates both with projects that came from out of AquaSec, but other projects in the community to like really try and focus on like reporting on security or providing some analysis for security. So this is the one we're going to be exploring today. And so I'm looking forward to getting into it and seeing how this works. Here are the projects that it's going to integrate with: Trivi, Polaris, KubeBench, KubeHunter. Some of these are AquaSec projects, and some of these are not, like Fairwind's Polaris. So definitely check out the announcement if you're curious about it. And then lastly, Steve Wade has put together some focus on GetOps as well, right? So Argo CD being released is actually going to lead us to the GetOps conversation. So he's put up a couple of repos exploring GetOps with Customize and exploring GetOps with secrets. And so I think this would make a great episode, just working through these things and like kind of exploring them together. We might do that in a future episode. So this is like GetOps with secrets. Like, how do you start from zero and get to a place where you have a cluster deployed while securely handling those credentials that are important, right? And so I know that I've had a number of conversations with Steve on this topic. Like, how do you actually like how does that work, and like what are we going to do? And pretty awesome stuff. The last thing I'm going to cover from all of this is the media piece. I want to give a shout out to the fact that Kubernetes is 6 years old now, right? Again, this happened, I think it was last week or the week before. And the Popcast, which is a weekly, actually, I'm not even sure there's a schedule to it, but there's a podcast put on by Dan Papandrea. We all know him as Pop. He's in the community. He works for Sysdig. He's got a new podcast out, and you should definitely check it out if you're interested in things that happen within the community. He just recorded an incredible session with Brian Lyles. He also recorded a couple of sessions with Craig McLucky, Joe Beda, and Brendan Burns, and asked some questions about, like, so Kubernetes is 6. What was it like? What would you do? And so I thought that was a great presentation on kind of the history and like where we're at with Kubernetes being the 6th. Reaching its 6th year, so that's exciting. Those are really great. And then Steve also put up Metal's journey toward throwaway clusters, which also talks about this stuff in this space. If you have a talk or a presentation that you've done that you want to see me talk about on HackMD, throw it into the HackMD. We always put our TGIK.io notes page up just before the show. Sometimes we'll do this on Wednesday or Thursday. As soon as that's available and it says the next episode, feel free to throw those links in there. If you have a talk or something or a message that you want me to promote here, or that you want us to promote here, feel free to put them in. We keep editorial control, but if you have a link that you want to put in there, just make sure you do it. All right. Blog posts, one from the CNCF that stands with the Black Lives Matter movement, and this is another one that's like super cool because I see it happening across a bunch of different projects within our community. Again, kind of making sure our community is in a good, strong place, right? Standing with the Black Lives Movement. We have Adnan Rashid has published a PDF of his CKA notes. This is a recent take on the CKA, so if you're interested in becoming a CKA, this is another set of notes that I think does a pretty decent job, and I also really like the artistic part of it, right? Like I love the way this is described, like breaking down what the objects are, how they work, kind of getting into the primitives. Fun thing to read, even if it's just reading it. And CKA is getting updated, and I think that there's supposed to be a new certification for the security side soon, so that'll be interesting. And then these notes, I think these all came from Liz and team describing what's here. So I'll be digging into that one as well. Oh, wow. All right. So CubeCoat isn't an intentionally vulnerable cluster, just a regular cluster without PSP admission controller. Interestingly enough, the default is not to have a PSP admission controller. CubeCoat, from what I've heard of it, has a number of misconfigurations. That's true. So stuff like the Helm 2 piece is unauthenticated private registry, that kind of thing. Godfathers. Yes, they were. Pop is a good dude. I like Pop. And what else we got? Please provide Kubernetes training. I think I'm going to go with, like, that's kind of what we do, right? We explore different projects every week and dig into it. I do actually hold a CKA. I still need to take my CKAD, but I'm a lazy buster. I'm a lazy person. Sometimes I don't get the certifications done as fast as I want to. So I need to actually take some time off, like, a week, and actually knock through those things. But I've had the CKA since it was in beta. I took it when I was at CoreOS. I need to retake it, recertify all of those things. And they're pretty good in the market. I mean, I think people respect what's happening there. All right. Let's get into Starboard. This is the repo for Starboard. And we get into the introduction. So Starboard integrates security tools, like we talked about before, into the Kubernetes environment so that users can find and view risks that relate to different resources in a Kubernetes native way, which I think is actually really interesting because they do actually make use of custom resource definitions, I think, as the mechanism to go about this. So let's go ahead and handle the installation and see what we think. So that means it's time to flip to desktop 2. Okay, new keyboard, gonna mess me up a little bit, but we're gonna get done. We are gonna get it done. All right, so. Create cluster, config, YAML. I think it'll be good. I'm looking forward to it. But should be fun. So I'm going to spin up a kind cluster with multiple worker nodes. I'm going to deploy some stuff. We're going to use Starboard to explore it. And then I'm also going to be leveraging Octant. I'm going to try that Octant plugin because I really like Octant and where we're headed with all of that. So first, let's go ahead and get everything turned on here. While we're waiting for that to happen, I'm going to jump back to our piece here. Oops, typo. My brain, I always have that problem. From binary releases. Oh, they have a plugin. I think I still have crew installed. Crew. Nope, I don't. Okay, got that far. Starboard init. Let's check out what Starboard init is going to do. Create custom resource definitions used by Starboard. It has an as or an as group, which is interesting. Presumably that's going to make use of like the kubectl as stuff. That points to a HTTP cache, certificate authority. Wow, it's like they kind of implemented kubectl almost entirely as Starboard. So Starboard. I'm just going to put this in my user local bin for now. Actually, I'm going to make it part of this. So let's do make dir bin, move Starboard into bin, and then we'll do the Theorem thing. You've seen me do this before. See, so DRM, we've talked about this on previous episodes. DRM is a thing that basically allows it so that when you move into a directory, environment variables that you set in that file, hosted inside of that directory, are made real inside your environment, right? And so I'm going to do export path equals path. And then pwd bin. Theorem allow, man, go path. So there's our bin directory. So now we have Starboard init. That was much quieter than I expected. Starboard init help. Okay, v10 might be too much. Okay. Get CRDs. Okay, that's just defining it as it says. I'm working on Ubuntu. I hope things go wrong. I tend to learn more. Yeah, that's true. I learn more that way too. So, I guess technically, get ns. So there's our namespace. Get pods-a-n starboard and nothing in Starboard. Get there's a Polaris name. There's a Polaris service account that's been created. And a config map. kubectl get all-n starboard. Okay, well that gets us that far. Let's see where we go next. Oh, we kind of did that, but we kind of didn't do that. So let's do that again. Boop. So that's what we saw before. It's interesting. There are some things that are namespace, some things that are not. So we have a syscube bench report that is a global thing, probably because it has to do with actually evaluating the configuration of the cluster itself, not necessarily those components within a namespace. We have a config audit report, which is namespaced, which means you're going to be able to get one in each namespace. A kube hunter report, again, probably similar to the way that Kubernetes itself works, so it kind of exposes the vulnerabilities that are there, or talks about the vulnerabilities that are there. And then you have vulnerabilities, which are namespaced. Let's go ahead and follow this one. All right, we got Nginx up and running. And then I like this idea. Let's dig into that, see how that works. Starboard find vulnerabilities for the Nginx deployment in our namespace. and we can get right to it. I like projects that have like an init. I wish it was a little clearer what it was actually installing. It'd be kind of interesting to see if Starboard had a init dry run or something. I don't see a way in here necessarily to so there's init, create the custom resources. Nice, that's actually pretty cool. So they have a way of actually exposing the RBAC necessary to run Starboard. They have a cleanup, a find, which is a call for managing the security standards. They have a get for getting security reports. I wish the init were like a way to I want to understand what you're putting in there, and I don't see a way to understand that from init. I feel like I have to kind of explore the project to understand what is happening inside the space. So let's do so we've done our find, I believe. Let's make sure that happened. So let's do our get. And see what we get. You know what? This will be kind of fun. I've been playing with this lolcat stuff lately. We can output that in rainbow colors. That is a lot of YAML. Wowzers. Okay. Hold on a second. Hi, Daniel. How's it going? All right. Aha. So we have Trivy running, and it has scanned our container, or maybe it's pulling a cache of the container. I don't really know yet, but it has information about the container that we've specified for sure. I don't know if that's actually aggregated. I'm curious, like, if the idea is that this is aggregating information about a tag that you have scanned publicly and you're just reporting on that output, or if that's actually coming from a scan that happened inside the cluster. So if we do kubectl get all dash n starboard again. Oh. I'm presuming because there's nothing out there and I'm not running Trivy locally that it has to be reporting on things that are known about this image rather than this image itself. And we can prove that, right? Because it's very unlikely that you've scanned an image that I've got. Run create deployment echo image equals inanimate echo server. Get pods. And so if we do our find vulnerabilities on the echo server, probably should have done that longer. Whoa, we got a bug. Index out of range with length 0. Scanner getting pod template for deployment echoes, scanning with options, scan job timeout, running task and waiting forever, creating a runnable job, getting logs for echo server container in job. Oh, it's a job. And then we delete the job. And the output was, we didn't like the scan. Oh, but it's actually just, so I wonder if there is a way to keep the job around. Bum, 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 bum. It looks like we have I don't see a way to tell it to retain the job. It'd be neat if there was a dash dash retain or something so that we could explore what was happening inside that a little bit more before it deleted it. Because at the moment what's happening is that it's creating a job in the Starboard namespace, I believe. Maybe it's in the Dev namespace. But then it's deleting it as soon as that job is complete. So it'd be great if it could leave it around so I could actually kind of explore what happened there. As it is, it's just outputted the error. If you could have a reporter operator of some sort of, oh, that'd be cool. That's what Steve's question. Live debugging, Daniel? Error handling should be improved here. Might happen because of an old image or an insecure registry from which the image was pulled. So this one is actually pulled from Docker Hub. And the image is, I think, the latest one that was built. I don't know when it was built, but it's just an image that I had figured that you wouldn't have scanned. And so it was trying to understand like what it would look like to scan it kind of on the fly here. All controllers still, I think it would still be, so Daniel says that's happening there. I think Gatekeeper is implemented some Prometheus. I think that's true, Liam. And then Rio saying, I think it would still be the controllers operating on the CRDs that would report those metrics. Actually, Starboard on master has a better error propagation from K8's job to standard out of the CLI. Job are created in the Starboard namespace, whereas the reports are in the same, that makes sense, okay. So let's do that. Go get, let's pull master and see what that looks like to see if we see a difference in the error propagation that we see here. So installation from source. I'm just gonna pull it from GitHub like I do. Because it is a Go binary, so I'm just gonna like pull it into my pull it like this, see if it'll automatically build. It might not. Our next big plan for Starboard is an operator to automate updating. Oh, that'd be cool. So you could actually do cron jobs and that sort of thing for the build. And then cd go bin. Did Starboard build? Starboard does not seem to have built, but that's okay. It's not super surprising. It's interesting. It didn't say anything about how there are no Go packages inside of there. GitHub, Aquasec, make Starboard. Okay, move Starboard. Let's see if we get the same error here. cannot unmarshal number into go value trivia scan report, which is a different error than I saw in the released version. This is actually an error that master propagates here. So if we do -v5, for example, which I love that, you know, the verbosity is something that we can manage here. We can at least see what is causing, like where it is in its process when it fails. Getting the logs for the so there's our job that was started. It got those logs but it deleted the job. Task on completion error. Okay. But we can do the in the box demo, which is against Nginx. That seems to work okay. But I'm going to test it against with this new binary that was built off of master, and then we'll see. So yeah, like the find command against inanimate echo server, which was able to deploy just fine. Actually, let's make sure that I haven't missed anything super obvious. Get deploy. Yeah, okay. So I did call it deploy. And it is running, so I know the image is there, but Turby doesn't seem to be able to scan that image for whatever reason, so that's kind of interesting. Logs of the scan job in the Starboard namespace, but I can't seem to get the logs because the job is immediately deleted. I would love to see more, and this is actually where I think one of the things that would be super useful is if there was a retain option, right, rather than a deletion of that job on success or failure. If it allowed me to retain that thing. Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's do Aquaset, next be Starboard, edit. Echo. Nope, still nothing. Maybe if we do Starboard help clean up and just make sure that all of CRDs are gone. So CubeCoat, API resources, star, nothing. Get NS. Delete NS Starboard. Just want to make sure everything's cleaned up, and then we'll re-init with the master, just in case you're right and there is there is a mismatch between what's happening in this inside here and what's not happening inside here. So we created our CRDs. Created our namespace, created our service account and our config map, our cluster role and cluster role binding. So then we can do find vulnerabilities echo. Same error. Oh, there is a flag. What? Did I miss that before? Oh, I totally did. You rock. Kettle logs -n. Starboard. Oh, is it because I used the latest tag? That'd be kind of interesting. Oh, so that's actually a positive result, right? Ah, I see. Okay, good point. It is this one. Let's put together my Mario Loria. The Docker file is from Golang as build, and then from scratch. Yeah, it is based on scratch. Yeah. That's fun. It's unlikely that, like, you know, that would actually happen in a, but it is a good catch. Yep. Quard. Let's do this one. Let's try a different deployment and see if we can get like a thing that isn't Nginx working just because. So kubectl create deployment quard image equals, whoops. And kubectl get pods. And then we'll do our find. I'm going to keep that log around because I want to see what happens when I keep it. Quard. That one seems to have worked. Call logs dash n starboard. What's our old one? It was D5 before, so now it's 8.6. Hey, we have a winner. Because it was built on Alpine, so we're actually getting the vulnerabilities that might be associated with that version of Alpine. Vulnerability ID, package name muscle, asperity, NVD, description. Oh, this is cool. So this is like basically just pulling back the content from the Trivy scanner for that image. One of my questions is, are we treating Trivy as a service here, right? So if I had an image that I built locally instead of one that was up in the cloud, it wouldn't be able to scan it locally, would it? Shall we find out? Oh, let's find out. So, the way we're going to do that, let's do make deer, quard. This is me just learning about Trivy. I hope you all find this interesting, but dunk. Copy. not going to work that way. All right. We got this working. So what I'm doing here is I'm just basically building like a local version of Quard. And I'm going to call it something completely different than Quard. And then we're going to see how, see if Trivy is able to scan that. And then we'll push our image up into my own Docker repo, and then we'll use Trivy to see if it can scan that. So that should be fun. That's what I'm digging into, right? I think it's treating Trivy as a service, but I don't know yet. I believe that Trivy, like many things, is going to actually refer to the CVE reports that different operating systems expose. So if we go to Trivy, we could probably find the answer to that question here, unless Liz wants to, Liz or Daniel want to catch that answer, but likely. So vulnerability detection. So it's pulling vulnerabilities from known about in these areas, right? So if it's based on one of these operating systems, then it can catch the vulnerabilities that are reported for those operating systems at those versions. Oh, I'm using Brave, which is like the free version of Chrome. I don't mean to make that sound dismissive. There's tons involved there. It's not just that, but let's take a look at our build here. All right, we got our image built. So let's do Docker tag blue, and we'll call it Maui Lion Quard blue. Docker push Maui Lion Quard blue. And then CubeCoat or create deployment blue image equals Maui Lion Quard blue. CubeCoat get pods working. Survey says blue. This is a brand new image that did not exist before. And we see it working. Trivy itself will scan the local image, but the standard job for Trivy does not. Whoops. Vulnerability aquasec github.io is invalid report. Vulnerabilities invalid value null. Report vulnerabilities in body must be type array null. Okay. So basically what I did here was I built a quad image. I was able to deploy it, but now we're getting a different error from the Trivy piece. Digging into saying basically that the response from vulnerability.aquasec.io report vulnerabilities invalid value. So we do kubectl get job -in Starboard.
I'm watching something
kubectl get logs -in Starboard. Do what? Neat. Oh, that's from 8 minutes ago. That's the one previous. That was my previous build. That one actually worked. What I want to see is this one. Nice. So it was detecting the Alpine vulnerabilities. It found none. Its target was my stuff. I believe this is just reporting on what the Trivy service is doing though, right? Fair enough. Fair enough. So cool. But to be explicit, the requirement is that my host has access to that external Trivy service, right? Like, let's go back to our docs here. Yeah, it was just built, which makes sense. Those things usually crop over time, but I don't see. Let's see. Getting started. Starboard init. Let's play with Octane here in a second also. What I want to know, what I'd like to know from here is in the vulnerability piece, I believe that we are calling out to a service hosted by Aquasec to tell it to scan the image, and then we come back with the results of that scan. Or is that actually happening in the job? Because it looks like the job is basically, the result of the job is to come back with the results of the test. And so I'm wondering where the actual testing is happening, right? Oh, actually, no, it says it right here at the top, doesn't it? So the job itself, let's just do a kubectl describe of the job. Let's see what that looks like. Job -in Starboard. Yes, so we are using Trivy locally in the job to do the scan. But are we treating it like a client? In the init container, download db only cached here, varlib Trivy. And then the action container is basically doing the skip of the update and it's doing the check. Nice. Yeah. That's what I was trying to understand, Liz, was whether this was a client service model. That's what I was looking for. So yeah, that's what I see in the output here, is that we do make an external call to download the database. and that's fine. But we're not actually calling out to the Trivy service. We're just calling out to get the database that we compile once a day, and then we're using that database to determine any vulnerabilities that might be associated with this particular image. And so that's actually pretty neat. One of the things I'm curious about is if there's a way to make that database available that isn't something that is pulled every time, like making it so that you could actually make this offline mode kind of thing. So, awesome. Okay. Well, cool. So that's actually pretty neat. That means that if I didn't have it uploaded, actually that's pretty cool. Let's try this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a Docker tag Maui Lion, card blue. I'm going to call it quad red. I'm going to do kind load image, or kind load Docker image, Maui Lion, quad red. Now what this is doing is it's going to make a new image, if you will, and it's going to like host it. It's going to be local on my nodes, so I can refer to it in a deployment, but I'm not going to pull it down from Docker, and I'm not going to push it up to Docker either, right? And so it'll be interesting to see what happens here. I think what'll happen is that the find will work the same way it did before. It'll be able to evaluate any vulnerabilities that might be associated with the container, regardless of whether it is locally available or not. So let's try that out. kubectl create deployment red image equals YAML -- dry run. I want to make sure that we're not doing anything silly like always pull, and we're not. kubectl get pods. So red is running. Now I just used the kind command to copy that into my kind cluster. So that's how it was able to start, right? The image that I've created doesn't exist in a Docker registry anywhere. It's actually local to my machine. So now in theory, I should be able to do red and get a result, or get the same output anyway. Unable to initialize scanner. Two errors occurred. Unable to inspect the image. Ah, it does actually. Oh, interesting. This is a whole different set of assumptions. Fascinating. So this is happening because you're presuming Docker, and I'm actually using containerd. This is also happening because it can't pull the manifest from the image that's been pushed, because I never pushed that image up to a public place. And so I think this is your point, Liz, is that right now it's not in an offline supported model. Really fun stuff. Yeah, I dig it also. All right, cool. Well, so that's the find piece. Let's do our get command again. Back to the example here. We did our init, we did our deployment, we did find vulnerabilities. Let's do get vulnerabilities. And actually, here's where I want to pull in that Starboard Octet plugin, because I think it basically makes it a lot easier to read. So just as an example here, like this is where sometimes the UI piece really hits what's important. If we do kubectl get vulns, actually, what happens when I do describe? So it actually formats it a little better. And it uses that to output effectively a summary. It tells us what the scanner was. It gives us a report that doesn't seem to be populated. That's kind of interesting. I don't know why those fields are empty. Summary, critical, high count, low count, and medium count. Pulls the description of the vulnerability as exposed by the upstream vulnerability database or vulnerability database. And that's pretty cool. So let's now let's play with the Octant plugin real quick, because I'm actually really curious to see how this looks in Octant. Because, whoop, hey, hold on, where are you going? Because I suspect that it will at least be a little bit easier to parse. Dun, 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 dun. So there's our plugin. So we have the person who wrote the plugin and the person who wrote the framework for the plugin all in the same call here. So curious to hear what you thought of writing a plugin for the Octant piece, and whether that was like super, whether there was like some feedback around that, like how that went. I don't think we've really explored writing plugins for Octant inside the show yet, but it'd be great to get some feedback on that piece. or so where did it go? Okay. So we got our download. Wait, what? I guess it's getting started again from kind of from where we were. On Octant, select the dev namespace. Where am I putting the plugin? Find the Octant Starboard plugin, move it into .config Octant plugins. All right. This will be my first Octant plugin. XBZF. Downloads. Starboard Octant plugin. Sweet. Octant. We saw the plugin register. That's pretty cool. Can't really see my screen though a little bit. Let's make it a little bigger. We deployed Nginx. And look, there's a tab. Vulnerabilities. These reports are not available. Wait. Okay, but we did that. And I think I saw the problem earlier, but I want to make sure I see it right, and I want to make sure that it is right. So kubectl describe vulns. Okay. Boy, that has a lot to say. Oh, I see. And still no report piece. So if we go back to our octant page, the one we had a successful report on was Quard. We go to vulnerabilities. Hey, that one works. If we go to look at the Nginx one now that we've done the get, that one works also. Okay. So that's cool. This is a great enhancement to Octant. What a great enhancement to Octant. Okay, so this gives us our list of vulnerabilities that the Trivy scanner was able to expose. It links us out to those things that we care about. It breaks it down into pages. There's 13 pages of vulnerabilities in the target Nginx instance. Let's take a look at the Quard one out of curiosity. So if we look at the Quard output, the vulnerabilities known about here are not quite as bad. There's 1 high, 5 mediums, and 1 low. Mostly around the OpenSSL stuff. That's tremendous. All right. While we're in Octant, I think it might be worth just taking a quick moment to take a look at the stuff that is also inside of here, right? And so let's take a look at the config map. So there's this Polaris config map that I'm super curious about, but haven't really explored. Because Polaris, to remind you, is the tool that you can use to determine the API before I say this, let's make sure this is true. So I believe that Polaris was the tool that just came out. Oh, but I'm wrong about this. So Polaris is the validation of best practices in your Kubernetes clusters. And they built a dashboard also. I thought this was just the one that was actually going to validate particular sets. But let's go back to our exploration here and dig into it a bit more. So now that we've got this all so far set up, we've played with Trivy a bit. We've seen the vulnerabilities. We've managed to expose them inside of octants, which I think is tremendously cool. Let's look at the Kubernetes configuration audit reports. So how would we run the test for that? Oh, I'm on the plugin. Yeah. Let's head back to the main project. So Get vulnerabilities. Starboard relies on labels and label selectors to associate vulnerability reports with a specified deployment. For deployment with n container images, Starboard creates n instances of vulnerability resources. In addition, each instance has a Starboard container name label. Ah, that makes sense. So you can actually figure out what it is. And then that way you could actually catch the, if there's if you have multiple containers, you can determine which one of them actually has the problem. Right now we've actually had the one container, so there hasn't been any need for that, but that is pretty neat. Let's try this Starboard Polaris piece, and then I'm really excited to get into the sys piece of the Kubernetes testing for center of internet security stuff. So let's try this one. While I dig the idea of not putting anything out, it bugs me. I want there to be something. So running a task and waiting forever, making the job happen. Server get. Config audit. It's interesting. Okay, well let's move through the documentation a little more, because I'm obviously not going to intuit my way through this. So we did our okay, so this I guess run the scanner to audit the configuration using Polaris. That seems like, oh, I see. Note that currently Polaris subcommand scans all workloads in all namespaces. However, once we resolve this issue, we'll be able to scan specific ones. That makes more sense. So right now we've just pulled back, we've scanned everything and everything, and then now we can actually pull back the configuration report for just this one. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. I will almost always want to see describe rather than YAML. Oh, that's not going to work. I don't know what I was thinking about there. So we've got it. We've done the config get. And we got some output. So if we do kubectl get config audit reports, deployment nginx, control A, describe. You can see what the output here is. So container checks, it describes a number of interesting security things. Which don't read super intuitively, but presumably it's trying to make a test. Privilege escalation allowed true. Message privilege escalation not allowed. Severity error true. Success true. Hard to actually understand what the output of that is. Like from these 4 lines, it's hard to understand what happened. I get that it ran a check. Privilege escalation allowed. The message, but I'm not sure if the message is from the result of the check or from the result. It says privilege escalation not allowed, and the severity error is true, and whether it was successful or not. Does that mean it was a successful check, or is it successfully blocking privilege escalation? We'll dig into that a little bit. Let's keep going with our test here. Similar to vulnerabilities, Starboard Octant plugin can visualize configuration audit. Well, heck. Here we go. So this is implemented subtly differently than the vulnerability thing. Vulnerability thing was like a tab in there, and then in the configuration audit reports just kind of tacked on the bottom. So you can run a new audit by running Starboard Polaris. That's the event. These reports are not available, but why? What if I refresh? Will you be available then? Well, I was able to see the report. I'm able to see the config audit report. Get deployment -n. Where would the deployment be? If we change namespace into Octant and select deployment. Oh, interesting. Okay. I see. So dev, nginx. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's not super intuitive in that it could be done, like I wouldn't know from here that it would not link me back. Like it just says these reports are not available. That's not super easy to understand. But I get why that is. So the result is that the object is stored at the deployment object, not the pod object. So here are. Oh wow! I just now noticed that we also extend the status object, at least visually in the UI, with critical vulnerabilities, high vulnerabilities. That's really cool. And then down in config audit reports, it was generated 6 minutes ago. The scanner was Polaris by Fairwinds. The version was latest. The warnings are 8. And the pod template. Still not super clear to me what's happening here, but let's just figure it out. So I understand that these controls are defined at the pod template layer and at the container level layer. But what I don't understand, I think it's because I don't understand what success means. Host IPC set, error security, yeah. True. Host network set true, host PID set true. I doubt that I have host PID set on this container. I see. Yeah, I think that might help. Oh, I see. So you're saying true in this case is a pass, and false in this case is failure. Is that where you're going, Liz? All right, there's a couple more pieces of this that I want to hit before we're done with our episode. So what I want to dig into next is I want to look at the. Okay, I'm going to explore this more. I'm really curious, but I mean I know that if I look at the resource viewer here, nope, sorry, the YAML, like the object itself. I'm not making use of PID status or any of the things that I think it calls out. So if we go back to our deployment, yeah, this is non-intuitive. So it's saying, I guess it's saying this is a pass, like we didn't do this, so this is a passed test, pass test, pass test, and then false. Run as root allowed, which means we're not explicitly denying it. Memory limits missing, also true. Memory requests missing, also true. I didn't put any of that into my deployment. Ah, that makes more sense now. I think you're right. Liveness probe missing, not ready, not read-only root file system. I mean, it's a great set of tests. It just is a non-intuitive result. Tag not specified, so we passed it. And then false CPU requests. Yeah, that makes way more sense when we think about it from that context, right? Well, it's like, I would say evaluated pass or fail makes more sense to me. Cool. All right. Next, I want to do the cluster scan, and I hope we have time to do the cluster scan and try this out. Let's do that one. Boop. Starboard help. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. I want to run the Kubench. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to do the keep the delete scan job around again. Control Shift V equals false. Because I kind of want to see what the log of that looks like. And then we'll also do Cube Hunter. While we're waiting for Cube Hunter to come back, it seems really fast for like a result. So they were saying that you could see the Octave plugin. Workloads, deployments, config audits, all right. Nodes. Okay, so let me go over here to nodes. You should be able to see. Didn't quite work. Kubench reports are associated with nodes. That makes sense. And Cube Hunter is added to the Starboard plugin module view. So like there's probably a plugin piece. Yeah, so there's a KubeHunter report. That's pretty cool. So we finished the test, presumably. And here's the KubeHunter findings. What's interesting is in these first three findings, read access to pod service account token, access risk, access secrets, local to pod. I don't know what this means. Presuming this is a pod UUID. But it's not a thing that would be easy to determine. Currently, kube bunches run without node selectors, so you only have a report for one node. That makes sense. Explains why it happens so fast. Okay, so what I was pointing out was in the AquaSec output for KubeHunter, the output is a little bit confusing because it is referring to an access risk. It's saying it's local to a pod, but it's not really telling me what it means. So that's another interesting one. It'd be kind of fun to dig into that a little bit more. We're at 2:32 though, and so we're already at this for about an hour and a half here. So let's explore this just a little bit more, and then we'll go play with the other things. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do kubectl Nope, not a thing. KubeHunter ID is clickable for more info. You can also run KubeHunter and just point to the cluster IP. That makes sense. It's a compromised container attack model, kind of. Yeah, that would make more sense. So you're saying like this, I would be able to look for this output in your docs? Oh, because you have that. Okay, so. What I don't get is what this is about. So let's jump back into that a little bit. So kubectl GetJobs -n Starboard -o wide Oh, I would have thought, I expected to see a test here in the results, because when I ran this test, I told it to delete the scan job as, oh, look at that. Is there a space? Nope. Delete scan job as false. So how come I don't see the job? Get jobs -a. Is the CIS scan in KubeHunter not a job? Is it running locally? Definitely creating a job. So it looks like this false flag is failing. So there's a bug there. Yep. Same conclusion. All right. Cool. All right. Well, I can't. I can't. That means I don't get to see the log for that. It is what it is. All right. So cool. The last few commands I saw that were I thought were super interesting here. Oh, I'm sorry. Starboard RBAC. Starboard RBAC. Man. The desire to do complete no data. What does Starboard RBAC do though? I'm confused. Ah, okay. I'm gonna go with you on that one because I don't see any output. All right. The last thing I'd like to see. Let's do a little bit more. Let's do a little more sleuthing into how the job is run for those jobs that we can talk about, right? So we can do describe job -n starboard D. So here you are running the command. Kudos for the label piece. That actually makes it really easier for me, much easier for me to understand what's happening. So that's really great. We don't have anything in the job describing resource limits, so that'll probably fail on a lot of clusters that are configured to enforce that sort of thing. That'll bite us. D5 was the result. I don't see, I'm missing a service account, I think. Yeah, it's already been deleted as the job is over. But what I don't see also, which is interesting, get -o YAML scheduler name. Automatic service account token false. That is awesome. That's what I was actually looking for. So we're not actually even giving this thing a service account. It has no access to the Kubernetes API, which is great. Security context and resources are not implemented. It doesn't look like it either, which I think is interesting. It's using an empty dir for its volume, which makes sense. So, I mean, It's awesome that that y'all have removed the service account. That's true. Either that or just like make it a hidden field until it's a thing. All right. Well, I learned a lot about this tool, and I also learned a lot about the really cool plugin implementation that it makes use of with Octant, which I think is actually super interesting. And we can see that we're able to see in our dev namespace that we're able to get certain things back, like config audit reports for each of the things inside of the space. And vulnerabilities, the vulnerability JSON parser needs, we found a couple bugs. It's always good whenever we're exploring stuff to see if we can find things that aren't quite working the way we expect. One thing I did not look at that I was curious about was whether there were any events that are surfaced by Starboard. And so far I don't see anything too eventy. Like if it were able to find something that were a top priority, like I guess right now the UX is that I would look at the report, right? So like I would understand for a given deployment, and this might be the link to the pod object that I'm referring to here, right? So like if I'm looking at a deployment within my namespace or within my environment, and I look at that like Nginx one that we looked at before, I can see results here: high vulnerabilities, medium vulnerabilities, low vulnerabilities. If this were represented as a event, then I might be able to associate that event with the pod object, or with with any pod that is making use of that particular image that was found to have vulnerabilities. And that way, the event stream would show up. Like whenever this report was run, I'd be able to see that there was an event, that there were critical vulnerabilities or high vulnerabilities associated with a specific pod deployed in my world. So that might be another thing that could be kind of cool. I do like seeing event integration into how these things work. But yeah. Well, I hope that was helpful. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves. I had a great time. There is a ton of other stuff to explore with this. It's a project that's just getting off of the ground. To be perfectly clear, I am like totally hammering on this project before it is like a super stable project. Like I think it's a great place to play with it and explore it and use it. It's immediately useful. It costs you very little to make use of it, and that's really all awesome. But understand that like like I would say that it's still a pretty early project. So I wasn't expecting it to be like incredibly stable and not find any issues. So incredible work from the Aquasec team and from the Fairwinds Ops folks. I mean, just tremendous that you have that we're looking at like integrating tooling like this into Kubernetes, and so that is like super awesome. Just super excited to see this stuff kind of head in the direction that it's headed. So let me kick back to the face scene here. Give me one moment. I'll do a wrap up. So again, thank you so much for this project and for like trying to further the state of the art for security within Kubernetes and the community in general. Like this is tremendous. I mean, and again, like one of the neatest things about it for me is like when you look at tooling like Starboard, its goal is to provide you more information, but not necessarily stand in the way of you of deploying these things, right? Starboard's not going to say like, look, you can't deploy this container because it has critical vulnerabilities. Instead, it's just trying to provide you that information or that context around those containers. And that's like an incredible feature, an incredible capability. So yeah, play with it and see what you think and provide feedback to the Starboard team. And if you want to do that, like they have an issues repository. I'm sure that they have an issues repository for providing feedback or what you found or things that you think are important. Definitely put those things in there. I'm going to try my best to actually open tickets for those things that I found. But yeah, as always, it's been a great day. happy Juneteenth and enjoy Pride Month here in the US and all across the world. And thank you all so much for your time. And I'll see you next time.